Hello and welcome to another episode of that 60s Recording podcast, the podcast that has conversations inspired by the golden era of recording. Before I start today, I'd like to just point out that the last two episodes, the intro and outro music changed, and that was because I thought it'd be quite fun to feature the tracks of the album that we were talking about. I had a very alarming text message from my dad, who will be listening to this, saying, "What's happened to the theme music?" And that's what's happened to the theme music. So we're back to normal this week, as you will have already known. So there we go. Okay, I have decided to start a Spotify playlist of the recordings that we talk about, because I think that would be quite useful. So hopefully by the time this comes out, if you go to the show notes, you will see a link to a Spotify playlist. I know not everybody uses Spotify, I'm sorry, but you could at least visit it on the website and just use it as almost an index for the things that you can listen to. But this particular conversation, and the last one really, there's a lot of examples that I think are really useful to listen to, and it's in terms of producers' conversations, it's so important to hear what they're actually playing. And I know if you're listening to a podcast sort of driving or while you're working or something, it's not easy to write this stuff down and then go and check it out. And I'm guilty of it as the next person, that I just don't go and check stuff out. Even if I do write it down, I still just don't get round to it. So hopefully if you go and listen to the playlist, it will be a useful tool. And I won't flood it with things, but hopefully with every guest I can put a couple of examples of things that they've worked on, just to give you a bit of perspective before or after you've listened. So yes, if you do that, hopefully if you go to the Podbean, if you Google that 60s Recording podcast, there's a Podbean site for it too. Hopefully I'll manage, I haven't actually done this yet, but hopefully I can manage to get this in the description of the podcast too, so you'll be able to just click on that if it should be in the show notes below. Okay, so anyway, today I am speaking with a engineer, producer, studio owner, musician, all of the things, called Ed Deegan, who has a studio called Gizzard Recording Studios, which are located in Bow in East London. They've been there since 2002. And Ed started off his career working at Torag Studios with an engineer called Liam. And Torag is a studio that you potentially, if you're in America, you won't know about this, but if you're from the UK, you will have heard of this studio. Lots of people have, and it was the studio that Elephant White Stripes was recorded at, the amazing album. So he started off his journey there and then moved into his own place with a bit of help from Liam in terms of gear, and they both have very similar attitudes towards recording, and chatting with Ed is really interesting about his approach to the whole analog thing. Really, there's not a computer in sight apart from the backing up process, and I love that. So yeah, it's a really, really cool conversation, and I really hope that you enjoy it. So here it is, part one of my conversation with Ed Deegan. I wonder if you could start off by sort of just giving a bit of a synopsis about what Gizzard Recording is and who you are, and sort of just an overview of where you're currently at.
Well, I suppose it's easy to start from the beginning. I mean, I started doing this when I was about 20, so I'm nearly 50 now, so it's quite a long time, a lot of recording.
Yeah.
But I started playing off in bands, around the sort of shoegaze sort of era of music, I guess, with regards to guitars anyway.
Yeah.
And we did our first record at Torag Studios, which is, cool. I'm sure you know. Yeah. So before that, I played around with 4-track and stuff, and, back then, home recording was, you couldn't really get great results. You get decent results, you had some space, but it was much harder to get good results. So as soon as we arrived, we were put onto tow rag by a friend of ours who was helping us with recording. I mean, from a guy called Graham Sutton from a band called Bark Psychosis. I don't know if you know
Yeah,
of
I've
them.
come across them. Yeah.
But he was far more advanced than we were, and in terms of his knowledge, in terms of recording, we were very green. And he put us onto Torag Studios, and he said, "Come on, let's go here. It's all old gear, And at the time, there was no analog or digital. It was just, it was old. It was 60s, mainly. And as soon as we got in there, once Liam's collection, it's just incredible. And I just, really responded to the environment. And by the end of it, because of my sort of basic knowledge of recording, I sort of asked Liam if I could, help with the mix, if I could just do a bit of mixing. And he was really cool about it. He said, "Oh, come on in, Jed, this is the bass," sort of laid out the board for me. I said, "Look, you just have a play around with that." And that was it. I was pretty much hooked from that moment onwards. So I sort of said to him, I said, "Look, can I come in and just make tea?" And back then, you could get into a studio by just tape hopping, being a tape hop. Yeah, it's harder now, obviously, because there's not, there's no tape machine mostly. But immediately I could get involved in the working environment, and sat by this machine, just shutting it back and forward and dropping in, and that was it really. I started there, and did that for many years until finally I wanted to just have my own place, and then when plodded off down to the Prince's Trust. I was younger then, young enough to qualify for that, and because no one else was going to give me any money, and I got I got a few, I think about $6,000 from them, which was great, enough to set up a sort of very humble, half-inch 8-track. Little mixer. I think we had a little studio master mixer, nothing special at all, and managed to get a small. There was a rehearsal room where I used to use a lot, and above the rehearsal room there was a tiny MIDI room, I guess is what you'd call it, like a tiny, sort of 8 foot by 4 foot rectangular thing that you could rent. And I rented that and put my gear in there, and I plumbed my clients down to the rehearsal room that was directly below. So when I got a booking, I rented the top room permanently, and the room below I used to just rent as needed from the guys who run the rehearsal room. And of course, day rates in rehearsal rooms are quite reasonable, so I could rent that for the day and put my bit on top, and it was still quite cheap for the band. So that's how Gizzard Recording started. With me still working at Torag and slowly getting my foot in the door, of having my own place, and it was so successful that I thought, right, great, I'm going to have, I gave me the confidence to kind of then go on and get premises and put together what I've got here now, So that's that. Should I carry on with that?
Well, I've just got a question on the back of that then. So, I mean, obviously, I haven't actually managed to speak with Liam from Torag yet. He's on the list, but he's
on your list. I would have thought.
I'm in contact with him, but he just keeps cropping up as somebody that I'm desperate to speak with. But I mean, to unpack a little bit what you've just said, my main question first of all is, when you started working above this rehearsal room, were you working with bands that you'd sort of met on the scene, or how were you? What attracted them to you? How were you finding out about people?
Well, because obviously being at Torag was really useful, because that was just in the build up towards the sort of biggest time for Liam, really, when the White Stripes Elephant thing was about. We didn't know that was going to happen, but that was around the corner. So bands would come into Torag, and it was never really a competition. It's never really been, even though we're up the road from each other, Torag and here, there's never a competition element to what we do. I don't know what it's a strange. It's never become that way, but I would just quite happily say, "Oh, I'll run a studio up the road," and then the band might come to my studio, then they go back to Torag, because if I had a smaller studio at the time, they might just do a demo at mine, and then we'd go, I don't know, engineering at Torag, which was really nice. So both of us, the work would be shared. So people would hear about it from that, and then of course word of mouth would spread, and they'd tell other people. And the fact that I was in a rehearsal room was really useful, because the guys would say, "Oh yeah, there's a bloke upstairs, he's doing recording." And also at the time there was a club called an Art Rocker Club it was called Art Rocker, and it was in Highbury in Islington,
Yeah.
and it was run by the guys who used to run 2 Pure Records, who discovered PJ Harvey, and they'd started up their own label, Art Rocker, and again that was very guitar based, very rocking, it's the sort of stuff that would sound great on tape. So I rekindled my friendship with those guys because I knew them from the 2 Pure days with PJ Harvey, and they really loved the studio, the idea of the tape, and it was affordable, so they would just constantly like plug bands over to me because they were running a club. So, oh yeah, go and see Ed, and that was great, so that really blossomed. And then of course, it's like it was word of mouth. Some other person tells another person. I've never really advertised, and with studios I've tried advertising. I've even tried Google ads. I've tried all sorts of ways of advertising just because I felt I should. Yeah. But I must say it's been completely pointless in my experience. It's everything has always come just from people telling other people. It just seems to be the way. I don't know why. Maybe social media it does more these days. I don't know, but in terms of ads, anyway, it's never been any use. But yeah, that's how that came about. Really, that's how people found me, and and that pushed on to eventually, getting my premises here, which is, a proper, decent sized space with proper library and everything.
Going back to when you started at Toe-Rag then, had you had any recording experience before that at all? Were you doing any home recordings?
Just on a little very basic Fostex cassette 4-track, and literally just playing around. And I'd done a course at a local college, just a very, sort of 6 months course. And at the time, it's quite funny how times have changed. But back then, everything was it was a small course, but it was very focused on the MIDI aspect of recording. Even though they had a tape machine, but everything is MIDI was everywhere. And to me, I just, I don't mind a bit of MIDI, but it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. I wanted to be recording bands, and then. The engineer, the guy who's running the course goes, "Oh, you'll probably never need to even know how to mic up a drum kit." And that just tells you the way people were thinking, back then, that, Simmons kit, and then a couple of overheads just to catch the cymbals. And that was the kind of idea. Yeah. And of course, I knew this not to be true. But when I eventually found Toe-Rag, that's why it was such a revelation, because everyone would just be setting up recording live, and we didn't care too much about separation, particularly. We just wanted to record. And back then, I know it sounds, a lot of people do that now, and it's not that strange. But back then, in the sort of, when was this, sort of the early 90s, late 80s, that was just ridiculous. You walked into a studio and said, "Oh, we want to set up live and play," they just think you're insane. It's like, that was just not on the cards, and studios obviously wanted to make as much money as possible. So, let's do the drums, let's break. You've had a band, they've been rehearsing for Christ knows how long, getting all their songs together, they're ready to go. And they arrive at the studio and the guy says, "Oh no, we're going to break all that down now. And you're going to just record the drums on your own to a guide guitar, and all the other guys are going to sit there." And it's just like, this is like, how on earth are you ever going to get the band to play with any kind of enthusiasm, considering just looking at the basic how they've set up for their recording session, they would have just rehearsed in rehearsal room. So why break that down? Why don't you just bring them in and try and recreate that as much as is possible? And that's what I'm sort of digressing a little bit. I'm sort of going into ethos there rather than. But this is why, basically, I guess I've taken this path, because of my own frustrations, especially in the 80s. I don't think it's as bad now, but back then it really was. You would never get to record live.
It seems to just be swinging back round to, it's a natural progression, isn't it? That through the sort of 70s and then into the 80s, everything started to get more electronic, and that was the new exciting thing. And Pro Tools came along,
exactly.
And it was almost seen as a better sound. I've just finished reading a book by an engineer called Adrian Kerridge, who was at Lansdowne, and he's got some advice at the back of the book about mic techniques. He did a lot of the my mind's gone blank. Is it the KPM library music stuff?
Right.
And everything he says is about the band being able to see each other and hear each other, and basically talks. He just says exactly what you've just said. As an engineer, the book was written in 2006, and he was working through the 60s, and he's saying, nowadays people are just forgetting exactly what you've just said, and the most important thing above all EQing and microphone techniques and whatever you want me to talk about, none of that's important if the band can't see each other and hear each other.
I totally. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? You get so I think you get kind of caught. I mean, I've done it myself. You get caught up in the kind of the more complicated aspects of the process, and you kind of forget that those simple things, like just the drummer be able to see the bassist, so he can kind of just get the cues right and hear the, it's like, it really is funny. I mean, and sort of, on a similar note, I mean, you can also be in the studios, forget, I think, that there's how good results can be without all this expensive equipment. I mean, I remember once, when I started to work at Torah, you kind of think, you're surrounded by C12s and, U67s and Studer machines. You think, oh, God, I'm just, whatever I do will be great, and then, so it's not, I mean, I'm sort of exaggerating, and then I remember once, a band came in and they'd done some home recording on an ADAT somewhere, and I was thinking, well, there's no way it's going to be better than me, arrogant, 20-year-old. There's no way, it can't possibly be better than something I've done on a Studer. And it was. It was better. And those sort of knocks make you realise, hang on a minute, why is it better? Probably because they were really comfortable. And when you looked at how they'd recorded it, they'd done it really simply, but that was right. That was the right way to record that band. It really did turn things. Little things like that made me really sort of keeps you grounded, and and you kind of realise, like, not to get snotty about, like, we can only record this with a U67, and my U67 might not be right. I mean, maybe a 57. It's better, and I really am. I mean, that's another really important thing for me, not to become a snob. But I mean, that's easy for me to say because I've kind of used that gear, and you kind of I've had a chance to come full circle on it. But I think it's really important, and there's never any reason why something shouldn't sound really good, just because you haven't got gear A, or item B. I do think you can do incredible things, and sometimes it makes you think outside the box, and you just do stuff you wouldn't normally do,
So on that note, what were you sort of learning or observing on a daily basis at Toe Rag? I'm just trying to build a picture of kind of where your head was at when you sort of moved into the rehearsal space. Like, what was happening for you in terms of what you were learning through the time you spent at Toe Rag?
Well, sorry. So when I was at Toe Rag, I mean, this amount of bands that came through, you just got to see all factions, all manner of types of music coming through and recording it. And I was really fortunate at the time. Liam was a good friend of Mark Neal, who's really good, great engineer in America, and he sort of caught. He'd heard about what Liam was doing and what we were up to, and he said, "Look, I'm really into it." But he was much more advanced technically than we were. His knowledge was. I mean, the guy's a bit of a genius, to be honest. I think he is anyway. He decided he was going to come over here and to London and help us sort through our gigs. We had it set up, and Liam had a red 17 desk. It was Abbey Road board, and we had another old board, that was based on, it wasn't really any make, it was something someone had sort of put together as a bit of a project, but it was quite interesting, and these great compressors in it. And he had that, and all these sort of bits and pieces, kind of like, and we were trying through books and trying, through what we'd read or whatever, to put it together as a studio would have been in the mid 60s. Yeah. And he knew exactly how to do that, and we were trying to achieve that, and getting some really good results. But there was things we were doing that we just didn't know that could have been done much better, and he came over and he helped us, and that was a massive learning curve. That those days, I remember when he came over, he was only over for a week, and we used to work through the night, and we'd work in the day, and we just kept going, and it was a really positive experience, just constantly listening to records, and then fixing gear, and finally we get his mission was, by the end of his time with us, to get our BTR mono BTR British tape recorder. I'm sure you know what they want. Yeah. The Abbey Road machine going, because we had one, big green, lovely machine, and that was the sort of goal to get this thing working. And his head, Mark's head was in this machine constantly for the whole week, and we were just thinking, God, is he going to get the thing going, And by the end of it, he did, and it was just such a joy, And we all did this recording session. We all got an instrument recorder. We did a session, and Liam engineered it, and I think I played drums, and someone else played some other stuff, and we recorded, onto the BTR, which was just, I'll never forget that. That was great. So all these experiences, I'd sort of, all these amazing people. It was just a really, lucky in a way. It's like anything, it's timing, isn't it? You roll into these things. And that set me up for what I wanted to do with my studio. And to be honest, my reasons for wanting to have my own studio was really just so I could stretch my legs and sort of follow the not massively different from Toby. You just wanted to work for myself, really, and have my own setup and things set up the way I wanted to set them up.
Yeah.
And but the ethos hasn't changed. I mean, there might be some slight differences between Torag and this studio.
Yeah.
But in terms of those beginnings and those ideas and those things we've discussed already about being able to look at each other and sort of ideas, not a huge. I wanted to just have that, but have it for myself, I guess, and work for myself. So the only way I sort of do that was to start off small. And it wasn't. I mean, in a way, it was quite good. I thought, well, I'm going to have to go back to working on a tabletop machine. I'm going to have to go back to like a Studio Master desk. I'm not going to be able to work on the Abbey Road desk anymore. And those things didn't bother me. I thought, well, I'll get there eventually. And that sort of leads me really where I managed to find this Alice desk and all that stuff. So once I got the money from the Prince's Trust and I was building up, and I was working at Torag, and I was also doing the beginnings of my own studio at the rehearsal room. So between the two of them, I was really busy. And eventually a friend of mine, Tom Cullen, he was a band called Quick Space Supersport that did quite well in the kind of 90s. And he got an advance from Matador. And he bought a load of recording equipment. He was quite an enthusiast himself, but never really kind of wanted to start a studio, but just liked playing around with the gear and recording his own stuff.
Yeah.
And he bought a Stilray 8016 track, and he somehow acquired this Alice desk, which I suspect, it's probably, one of the, track plan ones that people go on about, the Helios, poor man's Helios type things. Yeah. I suspect, I don't know for sure, or it's one of the ones that come very soon after that. And he got this thing, and it was in a bit of a sorry state. And he never really used it and didn't do anything. When I went to his place, he had all his studio gear up in Lancashire, his parents' place. And he took us up there to do some recording. I saw this thing. I goes, what's going on with this? And he goes, I'm going to get it going eventually. So I just badgered him for this desk. I said, look, let's bring it down. And I was living in the bedsit at the time. and I said, we can get it into my bedsit. and I had like a sort of chair, like a swivel chair that I'd taken the back off it. And I'd sort of precariously sort of balanced it on the chair so I could revolve it round to kind of operate on it in various manners. So he prompted it, took up the whole room, and he said, well, if you can get it going, you can use it, but as long as I can use it whenever I want. And that was kind of, I thought, fair enough. Okay, I needed a big desk to set up my studio with, and I needed something to marry. At the time, I had his 2-inch 6 that was in the 2-inch 6. The tape machine wasn't in the bedsit, but that was still someone else. But he said I could use that as well. So this was my way in to get like a, serious, tape machine and board to get myself going. And I've muddled about this desk for ages. I got the thing working, and then we got the premises here in Bow, and I put it in, and I got it, and it wasn't perfectly running when we opened it up, but it was running enough that we could get good results from it. And as the studio got going, I tinkered away on it, and I slowly got it, up to scratch with some help from. He's no longer with us now, but he's an amazing technician called Pete Martelli, who used to do all the studios. I met him through Torag, at the time, and he helped me, get the thing going and, get it up and running. And that's how I got it. And eventually, once it was up and running, Tom sort of thought, oh, got it going. And he came in and did some sessions on it, which was great. And eventually we arranged, I thought, well, I'm going to have to buy it off you, can I buy it off you? And we eventually, came to a sort of a plan. Yeah. I didn't buy the tape machine off him. I ended up buying the 16-track 2-inch off Liam in the end, because he had one, but he didn't want it. So, but that's where the Dallas desk came from, and that's what I'm still using. I'm just looking at it right now. So that's how that came about. And then
you don't see them too often. I think I only saw the first one I've ever seen in about at a studio down in Devon, maybe last year, I think it was.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and then since doing a bit of research about them, found out the significance of them. But I don't know anywhere else that's got them.
Yeah, I've never seen another. I've seen lots of the small mixers, which are great, by the way, the little green ones. Yeah. They're fantastic, but I've never come across another studio that's had one in one piece, And I've made on the Alice subject. I mean, another. I did a session with Mungo Jerry a few years, quite a few years ago now, and he had an Alice desk a bit later than one I've got, and he said, he had it running, and he had, the chassis that all the modules fitted into, it rusted away, but he still had all the modules. And he said, "Oh, do you want them?" So I acquired all Mungo Jerry's Alice desk, which I've got some of the modules racked up, running off the same power supply as this desk, because it's the same, So that's a nice little addition, to the situation.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, did you have to change your? I mean, you're almost a bit spoiled using such a beautiful desk at Toe Rack, and then when you kind of had to step away, did you have to change your approach sort of at all in order to get sounds that you were used to hearing?
I kind of just accepted that it wasn't going to be as good, a large, and because that reflected in our price we were charging at the time. Yeah. And I just like the rehearsal room that we were recording in. There was no treatment there. It was just typical carpet all over the wall. It was awful. It was a square room, so it was kind of hard. There's a lot of horrible spill that would come on the instruments, but it was almost like doing a location recording. You just had to kind of go with that and do the best you could. And I didn't have the mics really. So one thing I did do, actually, I did have to change a lot. Actually, now you've got me on the subject. I'm starting to remember. Like I would close mic drums more because the room didn't sound so hot. So I didn't really want that horrible kind of trophy mids that come fly around. I would close mic the drums more. Like now, I probably just do a kind of Glyn Johns type thing and have the mics hanging around the drums a lot more. The room's nice, but in that room I would always close mic them and put that overhead in and decide how much I could bear of the kind of spill and make it work that way. And obviously close mic, I DI a bit more as well than on the bass and stuff. I wouldn't mic as much as I'd like to. And because we were working on a 1/2-inch 8-track at the time, I would I didn't change too much. In regards to the tape machine, I didn't change things too much. I'd probably record a little bit hotter because there'd be more tape hiss. So I'd cut a bit hotter on there. And obviously the EQs on the desk weren't very good. So I'd try and not really do much EQing because I didn't because it was a studio master desk and the EQs were a bit, it wasn't a nice thing to introduce to the sound. So I'd probably attenuate more. Then filter more and do things like that. And I'd use the mic filters on the mics themselves a lot as well. And I try not to use the gear as much, because it didn't sound so good, So you'd kind of work around it like that. And I didn't have, the compressors I had weren't great, but I had to obviously use them. And you'd just sort of know using your ears, that what you could get away with. I mean, the reverb we had was just a multi-effects thing, and so I try and do my best with that. But I still got, a lot of those records are still out there, and people say they sound great, and you just had to be more aware. I think I was very aware that what I had, I think that's more the key, being aware that what you've got here is not great, so you're going to have to try and navigate getting good results here, and go on more vibey kind of type approaches than trying to sort of get something really hi-fi or something. You're not going to get it's not going to sound like Revolver. It's just not going to. So let's try it. Work to our strengths here, and do it that way. And then, of course, when I got it was quite nice having that. I'd work on my place in the week, and then I'd go off to Torag to pick up the weekends for Liam. So you had that immediate comparison, constantly being reminded, and which was really useful because you could just see it night and day and see what was good and what wasn't good, and what you wanted to have in your studio when I finally got here. That was important. That was really important. I must have that. I must get that sorted out. And for me, I must say that the most important thing would be the monitoring over all of it.
Interesting.
Because if I can't hear anything properly, and the room I'm in that I'm monitoring in, I can't fix it. So if something's a bit crappy, I might hear it. At least I've got a fighting chance to deal with it, and maybe try another approach or change something. But if I can't hear it properly, it's not. So I found that to be the key in all of it. The monitoring at Torag was really good. The monitoring I had at my place was kind of all right, I guess, but it wasn't cutting it. And that's what I found. I thought, wow, I can really hear it here. And that's what I could really, already found to be the key. So that was when I set this place up. I thought the control room's got a really good acoustic. The monitoring I've got has got to be really good, and and do the job. And I must say, I'm really pleased with it. It's probably my proudest thing is getting the acoustics and everything sorted out in these rooms without having a degree, just kind of working with people like Mark Neal and talking to people and sort of, grabbing the information that way. So I guess everything I've learned it's been a very old-fashioned way of learning. I never did a degree or anything or kind of education.
I'd argue I don't know if they would even teach that. I think monitoring is a subject that's completely overlooked, and it seems to. Again, the Adrian Kerridge book I was talking about, he talks a huge amount about it, what they did at Lansdowne and the monitoring there. It's just fresh in my mind. But it seems to be something that's come up again and again. And Ken Scott mentioned it when I spoke to him. That's, a hugely important thing for him. And it's almost, everybody's got like Rocket KRK monitors, and they're just more interested in having the best microphone they can. But if you can't hear it accurately, then sure, it seems so obvious when you say it, but it seems to be so often overlooked, especially in the days now of sort of looking at YouTube and mix tricks and all this sort of clickbaity type stuff. It's the basic stuff of just hearing accurately what you're doing is obviously very important.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because I was the same when I started off. I saw photos of the Beatles, using U67s and all this stuff. And I just wanted that. That's all I was interested in. And it makes sense. It's like looking at a guitar you want, isn't it? And someone playing it that you really admire. Just monitoring is all a bit boring, really, isn't it?
It's true.
It's not as exciting. So it took a while to realise, oh god, I must deal with this situation. Maybe do a few sums, and do stuff I didn't want to do. But it was very satisfying to do it, though. I do recommend, going down that road a little bit. If people want to do it. It's so satisfying when you can, and it's really a real revolution. You really, when you understand why rooms are doing what they're doing, you think, oh well, that's why it is. And you feel much more sort of empowered, to kind of deal with. It changes your decision making through the day. What you're doing.
Absolutely.
It's useful.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. So how did you go up? Sort of building. Not now. We've just sort of like rubbished gear. Now I'm going to ask you about gear. So like you moved into your to where you're currently at, and presumably you had the Alice desk at that point. So you moved that in.
Got it out of the bed sit.
Yeah. So what was your? So apart from the control room, what was your kind of? What was the space like when you moved in, and what were you, how did you go about sort of building what you've currently got?
Well, again, I got the lease on this premises here, and it was just it's the first floor of like a detached unit. So I was very lucky that it was detached. So that was a really, it's sort of like a business park, but a really old-fashioned business park. These kind of like shack-like buildings, you know, in this sort of thing. And our one is detached, so it's like a massive rectangular space. And at the time, the kitchen was on the first floor, but I've since moved that. And we're a small room area downstairs, you know, where a kitchen and the loo and everything. But the kitchen's down there now, but it was up here. But anyway, that's not really important. So a massive rectangular space. And what my thought was to literally slice it in half. Obviously, the smaller end would be the control room, and the large end would be the live room. Yeah. But before I sort of made that call, I was running these maths to work out how the rooms would respond to the bottom end on bass, you know, to get the standing waves and everything. So everywhere I walked in, I was looking for this place. I was looking, you know, going around with this tape measure. People would think I was nuts, you know, the estate agent. But, you know, I was really to see if it was possible to make that situation. I wanted a control room and a live room. And I wanted, obviously, the live room had to be big enough and the control room had to be, you know, everything had to be right. So eventually we found this place, and it was quite a simple matter of, like, obviously putting the stud work everywhere, room inside a room affair with the one wall down the side. And then we did that, and, you know, once I got that sorted out and the acoustics were kind of set anyway, I knew more or less how the room was going to be and what I wanted to do. And then got the desk in and, you know, set it all up and everything, and, you know, wired everything in. So what was your, have I moved off the point?
No, that's exactly what I want to know about. Is, you know, sort of how, I just think it's really interesting, the idea of, you know, you've got this experience at you know, a really high quality studio doing specifically sort of analog stuff, and then you get the opportunity to create your own space. I'm just interested in how you sort of went about creating the space itself, and B, you know, accumulating gear, and like what specifically you kind of had your eye on, or right. You know, you've got all this experience working on this amazing stuff, and now you can do it yourself, and that's it must have been quite an exciting time.
Oh, it was brilliant. Yeah. And then, so, I mean, luckily, and I was very fortunate because, you know, I had such a good relationship with Liam. So I finally got the desk in here, got the tape machine in it, wired it all up. It was more or less going. And the going back to monitoring, of course, that was a big deal. I thought, well, it'd be such a shame to have all this gear, and I'm going to have to sacrifice this thing that I really want. You know, I really want these good monitors. And Liam, because of the times in the 90s when the BBC were pretty much giving away a lot of their redundant gear. Yeah. There was a thing called the redundant store at the BBC that you could go up to, and you just had to prove that you were working in the industry. And you could go into this massive warehouse, and you could just go around, and the guy that was working there at the time just didn't care. And, you know, you sort of say, how much is that? Oh, 20 quid. What? Or, I know, it sounds insane. I've never
heard about this before.
It's called the redundant store. And it's before the sale of this, it's before they sold it all properly, you know, because they couldn't get away with it now at health and safety. But you just had to prove you were part of, you know, the industry in TV or audio. And we used to go up there, and Liam had a good relationship with this bloke. And you know, he got like I mean, I'm exaggerating, probably 20 quid, but it was nothing like eBay prices. Total bargains, you know, for this amazing gear. So he bought this stuff in abundance. I mean, the old tow rag, you know, was originally in Shoreditch. It was like 80s across the board, you know, like, you know, 5 or 6 1-inch 80s at one point. And he bought these monitors, these amazing BBC monitors. LS1As, I think they are. I can't quite remember the name, but they're the big green one. You know, you've got the Rogers LS35As, yeah, and you've got the in the 60s they built these big full-range monitors, similar shape and sort of, you know, dimensions, but much bigger. You know, kind of just a bigger version of that. Yeah. And then he had them at the Torre. He never really used them much. I don't know why, but when I set up this place, he said, "Oh, you can have them," you know. And as soon as I got them set up, they really rely on, you must have your room acoustically right. Otherwise, you know, it won't, because they're big things. You know, if you're going to kick out, you know, they'll give you an accurate bass, but if your room's not going to deal with that, it'll colour the sound. Yeah. So he gave me these monitors, and I, you know, set them up, and it was just fantastic. You know, I was just so pleased, you know, to finally, you know, so I've got the desk, I've got the tape machine, and there you go, you've got the monitors as well. You know, so that was a bit of a gift from him, you know, to get me going. Oh, lovely, yeah. Yeah, so that was, but it wouldn't have been possible without that redundant store and all the stuff that, you know, and we picked up from there, you know.
So then, this is 2002 you started, isn't it?
Yeah. So that was the timing. I think when did the White Stripes album come out? When did the Elephant come out?
It was around then, because
it was soon, wasn't it? After that, or maybe a year or so after that. It was around that time.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't have timed that better. Because Liam, Touareg became so busy as soon as that record. I mean, everyone wanted to record a Touareg. It was like, he was begging people to come in there and work. It was so busy, and of course, this place this was just like the overflow.
Yeah,
because it was just perfect. Because everyone wanted to record on tape, everyone wanted to try and remake that record, and we were so busy, and and obviously it's quietened down. It's quite a while ago now. It's totally quietened down. But the people of that time who were trying and making records, a lot of those people are still with me now, coming in, recording, and so it was I couldn't have timed that better. If I'd set this place up maybe a few years before or a few years after, it might have been harder to get the ball rolling, to such but that was such a push. It just was busy before I even opened the door. It was just so lucky in that respect.
It kind of answers one of the questions that I had, which is, kind of the early 2000s. I was young at that point, and I don't remember ever seeing a tape machine in any of the studios I worked in like my early bands. And it must have been, I was going to ask how people perceived what you were doing, but in light of your relationship with Touareg and the White Stripes thing, that's clearly they wanted the tape saturated sound, and that was something they were looking for, rather than just like that just happened to be the way you record, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, nowadays that was definitely them, because people were wanting that, and they were so excited, really switched on by coming in and seeing the machine, all the old gear and everything. Now we still get a lot of that. People dig us out for that, but I think now people sort of they're coming to the studio because of the work we've done, and the sounds they hear and they like.
Yeah.
But there's sometimes I'm not sure if they would mind if I recorded on tape or if I recorded on hard disk. But I always record on tape because I like it. I think it sounds better. But as I'm doing it, they're thinking, oh, I'm saying, is the sound being recorded on that tape? And I'm saying, yeah, it is. Yeah, he goes, oh, that's really cool. And then it kind of comes that way around, which is a different way of picking it up.
Yeah.
And then they'll become interested, kind of by that means. But it's not so much like a call, like a sort of demand as it was. People aren't like saying, I want to record on tape and that's what I want. We still do get that, but not as much as we did. People are just coming because they like the vibe, they like the studio, and they like what we've done, which I guess is probably the way it should be. So that's the sort of the frenzy has kind of totally gone from that kind of tape, everyone wanting the Touareg thing, and to sound like the White Stripes. That's completely vanished.
There we have it, part one of my conversation with Ed Deegan of Gizzard Recording. I hope you really enjoyed that conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And next episode, we're going to dig in a little bit more into his workflow, how he approaches recording with bands, and sort of the attitude of attitude is such a horrid word, but the sort of mentality towards recording he has towards recording, which I think is really, really, really interesting. Don't forget that if you visit my website, All You Need Is Drums, there is a shop on there, and you can support this podcast by buying one of the lovely enamel mugs that I've got for sale there. You could use it to drink out of, obviously. You could also use it as a pen pot. And thank you to everybody that's bought one already. I do really appreciate it. Yes, also, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please scroll down and leave a little review. You don't even have to write anything. You can just click the stars, but that would be very helpful if you wouldn't mind doing that. And do please spread the love of this analog recording. If you know anybody that would like to listen to this podcast, that would be great. So that just leaves me to say a huge thank you to Joe Kane for the intro and outro music of this podcast, to Adam Mallet for the artwork he supplies for the podcast, and to Rory Hancock for editing and uploading and doing all of the legwork for the podcast. Appreciate all of you. Thank you for listening, and I will be back with part 2 next week. Goodbye!